Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Unleashing the Talent Juggernaut. My name is Jessica Oberto, Director of Process and Implementation at People Science. If you are new to us today, People Science provides talent acquisition advisory services and recruitment process partnering, along with our proprietary software HireGate, which is an HR technology that augments any ATS to provide recruitment data and AI-driven insights you could be missing. You can always visit us at people-science.com to learn more. And please reach out if you have any questions after today's webinar. We're always happy to hop on a call or schedule a complimentary strategy session with you. These webinars, if you haven't joined before, are more conversational between our panel of guests. So if at any point you have something you want to include or you'd like to ask a question, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can type those in and we'll be sure to get back to you if we can. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. So first we have Christine Nicholas. She's the founder of People Science and HireGate and is a leading voice in talent acquisition. Since 1997, Christine has helped organizations modernize how they acquire talent, blending emerging technology with proven process and methodology. She's known for turning complex hiring challenges into practical, scalable solutions for clients. And our special guest today is Kathy King. Kathy is the director of TA at Merlin Entertainments. She's an experienced TA leader with 10 plus years driving recruitment strategy for global hospitality and entertainment brands, including Hilton Grand Vacations. She specializes in process optimization, building scalable hiring experiences. And most recently, Kathy led a global iCIMS rollout and introduced innovative recruitment models that boosted efficiency, reduced advertising spend, and elevated the candidate experience. So please welcome Kathy. Hey. And today, we also have Lindsay Roundtree. Lindsay is our Director of Recruiting and Client Services at People Science. She partners directly with clients to ensure every RPO engagement exceeds expectations while leading her recruiting teams that deliver the work. Lindsay stays on the front edge of HR technology to improve hiring outcomes and efficiency. She also provides daily metrics and market insights that drive real business results. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks, Jess.
And I am going to hand it over to Christine. And let me share my screen for today's webinar.
Morning to our people on the West Coast, Central, and good afternoon here on the East Coast. Thank you for joining. I know we've been MIA for the past 2 months, and so much has been happening, right? I feel like I've been saying so much has been happening since 2020, but boy, it's finally coming to fruition, I think, for TA in a lot of different ways. So this is what you've responded to about unleashing our talent juggernauts. We started to use the term juggernaut about 3 months ago. And the reason that we did that is I was actually in a conversation with someone and they said, this is like the 5th or 6th time that I've heard you just solve all these talent acquisition issues. You're a real juggernaut. And I was like, okay, what does juggernaut mean? And so I looked it up. Jess, can we go to that? So we've started a juggernaut series. You'll see it added, of course, here. We launched it at the Talent Acquisition Institute in Florida, which is where we had the pleasure of meeting Kathy King, who, wow, so happy to have you here today, Kathy. Kathy's definitely a juggernaut. We're like, oh, we have to get Kathy on the show. And Lindsay Roundtree, who runs recruiting for us, always a juggernaut. But here's the definition that came up. A juggernaut refers to a massive, unstoppable force or campaign, often used to describe something that dominates its field and can't be stopped. We need this in talent acquisition. I am exhausted. I don't know about you guys. I'm exhausted after doing this for 40 plus years and seeing how we acquire talent, always the third-rate citizen, not enough attention, not enough dollars, not enough business acumen in our profession. So when we meet those that are really doing it, we want to support them because I've seen so many people leave the profession because they felt unsupported. Don't leave, Kathy. Lindsay can't go anywhere. Jess is in here too. So we understand the importance of juggernauts. We did a whole series on juggernauts. We also have a really cool video. Jess, maybe we can send that out with this deck for those who asked for it. So looking forward to meeting some other juggernauts. But at this point in time, too, one of the things I want to mention about being a juggernaut in this industry is, talent acquisition is not regulated. Talent acquisition doesn't even have a degree. And there's lots of people now including technology and applicant tracking systems. And disclaimer, HireGate's not an ATS, but it's in the applicant tracking arena, and that we augment it, that are setting the parameters for how we work. So all the people that complain about their ATS, this is the organization we're putting together now to make sure that we have a voice, because obviously our current president, the current administration, is now starting to take a look at labor statistics. We're going to talk about that today, hopefully explain from what we can see from our vantage point. Jess, can we go to the agenda? Also, by the way, a Juggernaut is a big truck. So I think it's important, big disclaimer, bunch of trucks trying to make progress. There we go. Okay. So we talked about what's a Juggernaut. We're going to talk about the reporting and what we think went wrong, but more important to all of our Juggernauts on the phone, love to see comments, love to hear from you guys in the comments section about why and what you think about this. And I'll ask you to digest this. I'll ask you to come back to us as you think about it, and any ideas that you have as we start to say, how can we help influence what data is used to collect what's really going on in recruiting, what's really happening in our TA space. Okay. Then we'll talk about AI and remote work. We always talk about this in every webinar. We've got a great article that we'll talk about today. Consequence to that article, we did a poll. I don't want to disclose too much till we get to it, but pretty interesting. And we did our own poll with real people with real faces. So we have a lot of confidence in that data. And then Kathy will take us through what she's doing at Merlin Entertainment. So let's move ahead. Okay. First to our jobs reports. So you'll see here at People Science, and during these webinars every month, we talk about the 3 factors that are most important as far as we're concerned, or that kind of bubble to the top in the way of reporting that come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Just to clarify, always based on U.S. employment. That's really what we're centered on at this point. So the main reports that we concentrate on are the UI, right? The unemployment statistics, the employment hours and earnings. This is very confusing because you'll hear the JOLTS report will come out, and we look at the JOLTS report too. JOLTS represents jobs added, whereas your employment hours, earnings, and current employment, which is not called that, it actually comes out under the situation report. This is how confusing this is. And trying to track this on the BLS is that confusing because you have to remember that they rename it. It's a different name at different points too. However, I don't want that to undermine some of the effectiveness that I found about this reporting. But the challenge and the big conflict that we had is coming up in this employment situation report. First, let's take a quick look at the UI report. So unemployment going through till July stood at 4.2. There's nothing really remarkable here. You can see that unemployment is coming up, but it's not too crazy, at least not yet. There's no mass layoffs. We aren't seeing huge gaps. It's kind of a slow trickle upwards, right? Now let's take a look at that employment situation report. This is the report that's in controversy across the country right now, really across the world. This talks about monthly employment amounts, payroll amounts, and the amount of employees starting in positions. So is it a plus or a minus? The numbers that you've seen in the most recent years are all pluses because we've seen it increase. So if we look at this blue line, what we're looking at is 2024. So if we go to month 1, January, it's 119,000 jobs were added. And then we go on to January of 2024, and you'll see 222,000 jobs were added. Let's just punch all the way ahead to September of 2024, 240,000 jobs. And we ended December at a robust of 323,000 jobs added. Now let's take a look at the orange line, because the orange line represents 2025. You can see that in January 2025, pretty much like January 2024, 111,000. There's 2 different terms, 2 different definitions here for seasonal. Seasonal for in our sakes is how is that matching up to the year before? And seasonal is the impact on employment. And that's important to understand because I think that has very reflective on what went wrong with this report that is causing so much press. Okay. First thing to note, Jess, can you just go back to the slide before this? This is a train wreck, right? If we go back to UI, just go back to UI a second, that's good. See how it's pretty consistent and I said slow trickle? Let's move to the next report, to the situation report or the employment change report. Look at how erratic this is. Now, let's just jump ahead and talk about how this is defined and what happens with this report. Okay. Here's where the chaos ensued. During the month of May of this year, the BLS originally reported there was 144,000 new jobs added. They changed that, which of course they would, and we'll talk about how there's a 3-month trend on this. You're going to see preliminary numbers in your first month. So when they looked at that first month of May, their preliminary numbers was 144,000 were added. That number has now been fully adjusted down to just 19,000. That's a big discrepancy. And we all know that the Federal Reserve, certainly the current administration, are looking at these numbers and making decisions about economics, are we in a recession or not. Labor force is what's been holding us in place. With that comes an incredible amount of press. And when we talk about bias in the press, I've got to tell you, I've had my nose in this information since it was announced. And it just depends on who you talk to and who you read through. So it's really important that this is our profession and we take charge of what's really going on from our perspectives, not just what this news outlet thinks or this news outlet, this political party thinks. Really kind of coming into ourselves and saying, what are the real numbers for us and how does it mean to me as an employer? Then again, in June, they originally reported 147,000 jobs were added. They modified that down to 14K. So why did this happen? Why the heck did we have this kind of a thing happen? And then, definitely worth mentioning, in July, our first predictive is saying 73,000 jobs added. So let's just move to the next slide, Jess. I'm giving you these small P's. You can actually find this on the BLS. This means that these are preliminary data. So that data that we're talking about, that number 73 for the month of July, that's preliminary data. And the reason it's preliminary is that the BLS will collect this data 3 months trending. So if we go back and we look at May, you can see it's a solid 19. It's not preliminary anymore because we've looked at the numbers that were presented from corporations in May, June, and July, and the BLS has solidified the number at 19,000 as compared to that original 144, I think it was. Right. When we move on to June, we see that it's still a preliminary number because we're only 2 months in counting. And then when we move to July, we're only 1 month in counting. So why the hell would they do it this way? Let's move on, Jeff. Okay. So how does the BLS collect this data? Which, by the way, every source that I can see, and I have not been able to track every source down, is still saying that the BLS globally is the absolute best metric and reporting system on labor statistics. Concerning, but if you take a deep dive and you see how thorough they are, you can see why that statement might be made. Not that they don't need to make changes, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay. So there's in essence, two different ways that they collect data. The first is they have 2,000 surveyors who collect data from households, 60,000 households a month. No household is surveyed more than 4 months in a row. And the way that they do it is, if this is your first month, you're in 1/8% of the 60,000 is first month. 1/8 second month, 1/8 third month, 1/8 fourth month. Does that make sense? So they're trending this 4-month period with these household surveys. More importantly, and I'd love to see a show of hands for our attendees if you are the person in your organization who's responsible for the CES. So the CES is the data that's collected by the BLS from corporations and their estimates about where they are. They survey 631,000 businesses, and the way that they do that are through phones, digital statistic forms. It's important to note that this is not mandated. It's legal, though. There is a law that says that the government can collect this data, but federally, no organization has to meet that, has to report it. There are 4 or 5 states, South Carolina, I think is one of them, that mandate that all employers fill out this report. We're incorporated here in New Jersey. It's not mandated, but we get this report maybe 5 or 6 times a month if we don't fill it out. So they're really asking for this data. And I think there's a lot of reasons why organizations fill it out. What's important to note about this data is that it's been collected from corporations for 7 decades. If we go back to the household data, we'll see that that's the same data that's being collected since 1953. This prompted me to say to Kathy this morning, I don't know why they put Doge on this, right? Like, collecting data the same way we did since 1953. Wouldn't it be good to have a little better technology to help us get there? Yeah. But it's very complicated, a little bit more complicated than that. Okay. So employers are going to report different varied workforce data that can be added to the mix, but the two primes are hours worked and earning to date, and the increases on those dictate where they say we are as far as work at it. Make sense? Okay. So surveys for the first time frames are collected those 3 times. We just talked about that. The first month they can adjust. And by the way, what the Bureau of Labor Statistics said about this is, look, a lot of employers did not report their first month. However, our algorithms allow us to make predictives based on what we have. So they went ahead and made predictives based on what typically happens. And if we look at the historical data on this report, it's pretty darn accurate, right? So the question is, what the heck happened in May and June, right? Which, if you've got people involved in conspiracy theories, they're right away going to go to the political side of this or the dark side of this. I think that we need to be a little bit more unbiased. And again, our data, let's talk about that.
Well, and you mentioned too, the last time we saw that kind of a dip was like 2009, right?
It was a one-off in 2009.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, a confusing time, right? And, one of the things we were talking about today, and we're going to talk a little bit more in a second. Let me just get through the numbers real quick. But benchmarking and seasonally adjusted August and February. So August, by the way, is a month where we where the BLS goes in and does a benchmark. And they say, how do we do January till now? How are those stats holding up? And in other words, they're going back and reevaluating and requalifying and benchmarking against what they already had, and it still stands to reason that that's evident. So that may be another reason, because August is when those adjustments were done. By the way, the head of the Department of Labor and the person that was turned on this isn't privy to these numbers until just before they're reported. So the chances of them being able to manipulate them are really, really, really hard to do. So for the head to do it would be very, very difficult. I'm not sure how that would trickle down, but I think it's kind of an easy off to say it's her fault. Okay. So again, report's been in place for 7 decades. The accuracy has gone up. The accuracy in this reporting has gone up, not down, even though the selections that are being surveyed are somewhat smaller. So on that note, I'd love to hear what you think. So here's the question: why are the last 2 months so far off? Is it political? Is it just poor timing? Or erratic times? I think that's what you were alluding to, right, Kathy? Erratic times calling for erratic reporting. And is uncertainty causing these hiring changes along with the deer in the headlights? So when the people who do this report sat down, were they like, I don't know yet? I mean, I would love to hear from the group and from everybody on the call now. Any thoughts on this, Kath?
Yeah, I mean, my immediate thought is just that the uncertainty, right? Like and it's everywhere. If you just look at, in my neighborhood, there's a lot of construction going on. That's sometimes they stop, sometimes they don't, because they're not sure about the imports and what's going to be available and what's not. So it just kind of, there's so much unknown, and that's just one little industry of experience where I think everybody's got an example like that, where we're just not really sure when it comes to the entertainment industry, when it comes to we largely depend on whether or not people have the available income to go on vacation. Right. And so we think a lot about that, like revenge travel was a coin that came up a couple of years back, and trying to anticipate what people will have available. And I think from where I'm sitting, we're all in a uncertain, we're not really sure. We don't even really know if we're in a recession. We're not sure. And I
don't know if we're in a recession.
It makes sense that you wouldn't make big calls right now,
Yeah, and if there's anybody on here too, and we'd love to hear, even if you're not, you watch this recording, that fill out the CES for their organization. I think that would be interesting. I think because it's not, one of the things that we did talk about too is because it's not regulated. Could it be that regulation for organizations has changed considerably since January, right? Organizations that were regulated are no longer going to be regulated. Are the gloves off for regulation? Right? We've seen diversity become 5th, 6th tier, where it was at the premier and was being regulated. The gloves are off for that. Could it be that organizations are saying, well, I'm not going to fill that report yet. I don't know what's going on. That's not as important. Any thoughts there? Again, would love to hear from people in the audience that might be able to say, yeah, I fill out the CES report, or here's what happened to us. I mean, perfect storm, right? What our organization go between AI and the changes that are coming about as far as the way organizations operate in general, regulations changing, so many tariffs, so many different factors. Do you really provide any kind of survey data with confidence? And that new release comes out, right? The first Friday in September. So that's going to be interesting to see if the 73,000 added in August holds true, or I'm sorry, in July holds through the first preliminary shot. That'll be interesting. So in any case, good information. Anybody else before we move along a little bit? Okay. So timely as it is, there's a great article that was put out by the Wall Street Journal. Now, big disclaimer, not supporting any media right now. Have my own brain kind of going over and over different media sources, and it's very hard to say who's biased and who isn't, because just the way things are written. I mean, if you really take a deep dive and you do a comparison, the media has its own theory. However, this is a really good article that I think they did some really good stats on, and I did go back and check some of these sources. So the article doesn't just talk about, here's your stunner. Make sure you read the article. AI is wrecking an already fragile job market for college graduates. Ooh, I mean, it's the negative that kind of drags us there. But here's some of the stats that came out of this. And the reason I found this interesting is it's talking about entrance to the workforce. It's talking about the new rules in the workforce, and it's talking about the new world as a whole. And I think talking and looking at these and talking about this is certainly worth it for our organizations. So the graduate unemployment rate Q1 to 2025 was 6.6%. The entry-level job listings dropped since 2019 by 17%. The drop since ChatGPT launched in November 2022 is about 32%. So just the announcement of ChatGPT dropped the amount of entrants since ChatGPT. The underemployment among grads is up to 41.2%. That's a very high number for that category. Jobs per application increased by about 30%, and projected elimination of entry-level roles could be up to 50%. The number that could be on here is that up to 50%. There's some AI leadership that has made those comments, and the news is quick grab to it. The others, though, are pretty accurate in their reporting and are not kind of like wishy-washy. Those are concrete numbers. So what the heck happens to succession planning? Right. So what happens when you're a remote work? Go ahead.
When you first showed this slide, I was like, whoa. But I think at the risk of going back a little far, if you imagine what the workplace was like before computers, I don't know what that was like, but if you think about that and defining what an entry-level position was pre-computer versus what an entry-level position is with Google, I think it's interesting to see, are we just leveling up what an entry job looks like, and we just haven't caught up with the definition of what that means? Or is there more to it than that?
No, I love them. That's so well said. So the job description is just changing, and now we just have to change the way we train grads.
Yeah, right. Like, so, the teenagers that are teenagers today, we talk a lot about how they are the first generation that they actually have access to more information than their parents have to offer. Like in previous generations before Google and your ability to have unlimited resources through the internet, you were largely dependent on what your parents told you as information, and now they're teaching themselves. So is it also safe to say then that they have upskilled themselves through culture in the world where they're able to find things now, and research from that side? Like, isn't there a Progressive commercial where they're like, define what climate is, and all the adults are like, well, and they're like, I'm just going to Google it. Yeah. Like those kinds of moments, right? So it's just interesting. I think we're just redefining a lot of things in this market, especially with our undergrads and those that are coming out of school.
It is a whole different world. I know just my son's in 7th grade, and pretty much every one of his friends has their own business on social media. One of his friends is doing marketing for his other friends' parents' tile company. Like the impact that technology has had in social media on, you know, a seventh grader to where they all are running their own businesses right now is astounding to me. So as they're moving on, I can only imagine what they'll be capable of doing with technology. It's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
just
insane.
disclosure, your son, we're going to show a poll that we did. Your son voted in the poll.
He did.
Yeah. And how old is Connor?
He is 12, soon to be 13.
12. He jumped in and voted on this poll.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. Why would he be? Well, except he's your kid, right? But I mean, why
There are
would he be
many
interested?
entrepreneurs at this age, though. It's like giving them these tools, they're able to do that. I wasn't doing that in seventh grade.
Yeah.
And Catherine, to your history, I'm the product of two entrepreneurs. Both of my parents are entrepreneurs. And it was a terrible life as a young kid because everybody had 9-to-5 jobs. Those are my parents' 9-to-5 jobs and kind of stability. Right.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool to see it turn on its heels. But so this is the data that's been gathered from organizations and different resources. This is a great read. We're going to send this out. So I suggest you take a look at the article. But this prompted us to say, let's put our own survey out there, right? So the BLS can do it. Maybe we can do it better, right? You got to think like that. How can we get better at this? So I chose one question. I did a TikTok and we pushed it out on all the other platforms, which were Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn. Anybody else, Jess?
No, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram.
Okay. And we got like pretty much nothing from the other platforms as compared to what we got from TikTok. So the question that I ask is, new grads, are you interested in going into management and then climbing the corporate ladder? And I explained a little bit about that. Here's the poll results. 674 people voted on it. By the way, it had almost 60,000 views in a 4-day period. It had 3,000 likes. These are real people that you can identify. Even if you throw out the top 10 and the bottom 10, we're still getting a good clip of people that we can actually talk to. It had 34 comments, which were interesting, very interesting to me. This is my corporate account, Christine Nicholas 5. I encourage you to follow and let me follow you. I'd love to hear what we're saying on TikTok about employment. And yeah, the Chinese can say it, but Chinese can see everything in my opinion. Okay. This is interesting, right? 196 or 29%. Yes, I'd be interested in moving into management. When 478, a resounding 71% said, no, thanks. I don't want to go into management, which is cracking us up, right, Catherine? Because Catherine, you were saying, it's like when May comes around and you sit down,
Yeah.
everybody's going to be, I'm going to be, VP in a year. Does that story
Yeah,
change?
think about the people that, you would go to a career fair out of college, even a mere 8 years ago, you would be talking to individuals and saying, what are you looking for? And unanimously, they all wanted to be in management. And it was such a struggle because most of the time, those students weren't able to tell me in what. They just wanted to be managers. And there's definitely, what's exciting about this statistic is that we're taking off the blinders of, you are successful if you're climbing a corporate ladder angle. They're making their own businesses, they're running their own shows, which I think is incredible. But I was so taken aback by it, I actually threw it out to my team on a team meeting. And one of the things they said to me that was amazing was they said, there's just different ways to grow. That just because you're not getting promoted doesn't mean you're not growing. You can grow in your communication style and your skill set within a particular role or system. You can get involved in various projects and stuff on the side. That I think we're leaving the world where you're 100% all in on the role that you're in and dependent on the people around you to make decisions on growth for you, which I think is incredible from that side of the fence. But another piece that they said was, a lot of businesses right now are very focused on do more with less, do more with less, do more. And that's sort of the narrative we've been hearing for about a decade now. And a lot of them said to me, I watched some really great leaders become really tired and really miserable. And it's just not watching what they do every day. A lot of the times I hear it and I go, ooh, that's not fun. And so there's less sparkle to the role that it used to be as well. But I found it to be a very interesting statistic as a recruiter thinking about who we're going to hire next. This information is very important. So
So what does that mean to me, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Well, and it's kind of astounding, right? Having lived through the yuppie years, like when I was first in the workforce, yuppie was a thing, and young, upwardly mobile people, and getting ahead meant everything. Didn't matter what you did, getting ahead and money was everything. When we did the TikTok, what I added to it, I did explain, and I used the term, "Are you interested in climbing the corporate ladder?" No. Are you interested in management? In the comments were, I did that. I don't like it. I don't want to go back to it. It's an extra. I think the failure in industry, as far as management is concerned, period, is that everybody, that's the stone you had to take to get anywhere. Like that's the step you had to take. And that's the ladder that had to happen. It's time to
Well, and
rethink that.
that's the part of the statistics that's most shocking is if you look at the younger group on that list, that's where I would expect to see that big dreamer mentality of like, I want to be, running the show. Like, not to show myself on it, but I used to tell my friends I wanted to be a business vet. And that was all I used to tell people is that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to run the show. I wanted to see the table and I wanted it to be a lot of fun. And so to think now that the individuals that are growing up today, they're not dreaming like that. They're thinking of the things they're going to create. And their definition of success is just so different. And so it's important to hear. It's important to understand for sure.
So is the power dynamic changing? Is that, I mean, obviously climbing the ladder sounds negative, period.
Yeah.
I think the mindset has just changed, right? So you don't have to climb the corporate ladder to be an entrepreneur. You can do that on your own with your own content, your own creations. The doors are so much more open for the younger generation that have access to knowledge and facts and also a lot of non-factual information that they have access to, right? But the ability to access all of that information really gives you this thought that I can be my own boss. I can be my own leader and I don't have to follow someone else's guidelines in order to do so. Where, so much of the corporate life that we've lived, that story is very different. Kind of going back to what you had said earlier, Catherine, like maybe that story is changing for those and we kind of have to change with it. I do think there are things that we can do to help encourage those within our organizations to continue to grow with us. But I do think that there's this big mindset. I'm going to be my own leader and I don't want to lead others in the midst of that.
And at the risk of dovetailing off that too far, like I think the big core of this conversation is around the word independence and trust, right? So if you think about one of the big push-pull aspects of corporate America today is working remote, working hybrid, coming in the office, the flexibility, and all those different pieces. And I think when you're an entrepreneur running your own show, like we're now competing with that and the ability that somebody has to do that. Because why would I do that if I can go on my own and balance my life and time? And so much of the last several generations have been impacted through 2008 crisis, COVID, furloughs and layoffs and all these things that like if you really think about how it used to be, you used to get a pension and they took care of your whole family and you had got a +1 to the Christmas party. Now Christmas parties are sort of limited. So, those different aspects that come through, I think in talking to candidates, it does sound to me like the number one factor they want is that sense of autonomy and trust to be able to balance their personal world with their work world and the trust that they're doing it. And we just have to let that happen to some extent. There's a time and a place in the office and, that hybrid work is an important piece too. So there's still connections, but at the end of the day, I think it's just important to think through, like, if growth isn't what's driving you, then we have to look at what's next. And what's next is they have so much more capacity to reach for the stars without their boss's approval. Right. So how does that play in? Right.
Well, when you think about it too, these constraints of being part of the ladder. And I know when I left corporate America to start my own company, it wasn't of my own free will. There was nowhere for me to go as a woman. They were just told point blank, we're not going to put a woman at the helm. It was 1996. They should have been a little more current than that, but no, okay. It was a good catalyst for me. I would never trade that. But I think the corporate structure and the technology that supports that, and I think the ATS is a really good example of that, dictates our work behavior, right? I don't want to use Copilot. Every 5 seconds, they're forcing me to code. I'm like, you are wasting so much of my, sorry, Copilot. You're wasting so much of my time. Like, and we listen to, right? So we've augmented over 40 applicant tracking systems as an RPO. And we have recruiters that decline positions because they're not going to work in that ATS. And I'm always like, yeah, go get it. Damn, I wish we could argue, but whatever. Is that going to change, right? Is that going to change now? I know when we look at our product, we're trying to incorporate more and more technology so that the user can mandate how they're going to operate as compared to being dictated how it's going to happen. The idea, I think, is if we move away from trying to turn, just picking on you, Jess into a manager, when she really is a good technician, is going to give her a better comfort level. She'll sleep better at night. She'll feel more accomplished, right? And she'll have the technology to do the things her way. Is that the new world of work? We ain't there yet.
I think a little bit. I think we're headed there. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It's people like you, it's all of us on this call that can shape that. We need to stay on that. Anything else before we move on to hearing Catherine's journey? Okay. Take us there, Kathy. Tell us what is going on at Merlin. We've got a lot of transformation.
Yeah, no, it's a really exciting time. We've got a lot going on. I think the best way to synopsis is just to say we're bringing talent acquisition within Merlin Entertainments into the 21st century. And as part of that, we're looking at kind of moving into a shared services model for the UK, and looking at aligning the recruitment experience, and that requires looking at potential efficiencies, who in the teams are doing things really well that should be blasted and scaled, and how do we arm ourselves as a profession to really be an incredible expert to support the journey the company is on, and when it comes to growth and opportunities. So with that, I've been tasked with sort of taking a look, big picture, step back and say, what's the tech stack we need? What does that really look like? And does it apply to Merlin Entertainments and what we do? We're so unique in the sense that, for our audience that maybe is more US based, Merlin Entertainments has a lot of different brands within it. We have the Legoland theme parks. There's 3 large Legoland theme parks within the US, and several others globally. We also have Sea Life aquariums and Madame Tussauds wax museums and Lego Discovery Centers that are really great experiences for kids and families. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to do. And we're kind of sprinkled all over the place. So it's not like we have, 2 big hubs that we, are talking through. So looking at ways to go about that. And I think it's also important to say that as an organization, one of the things that really kind of is the sparkle to the company is that they were largely started as more of an entrepreneurial spirit. We've got GMs at these sites that really own and have a lot of passion for what they do every day and the success that they bring forward. And so partnering with them from a talent acquisition perspective is unique, right? Because you want to hear and understand what's unique and special about that particular site and how to help. But at the same time, understand and balance the market when it comes to the candidates and what they're going to be looking for, what's important to them, and how to kind of merge all of that together. And I think any recruiter listening today understands that merge and the alignment that you go on. And so with that, we're looking at a couple of different tools, right? So for example, is there a time and a place for AI to be involved for more of an automation experience? There's perks to it in the sense that It makes you more agile if we, grow or shift or move. We've got the ability to do that as a team with the automation involved. But just like we started to tap on to in the beginning of this conversation is that really tough balance between the computer experience and the human experience, and you merge them, right? And I mean, so for example, I went to Wendy's last night and AI took my order. And I forgot ketchup only on the sandwich and said, hey, but they asked me what kind of sauce. And I said, oh, by the way, that sandwich ketchup only. They got it. It was fine. And it spooks your system a little bit. And, we've seen these different tools within AI where they can do phone interviews for you. And no matter how difficult you make it, things come around. And so in a way, you're a little offended because you're like, that's what I do. I am great at that. But the secret sauce is kind of working with AI. The person who rejected the computer back in the day is the same person who allowed it to take their job. Where if you work with it and you find out ways to allow it work with you, you come to a better place. And so I did this a little bit at Hilton Grand Vacations a couple of years back, where we're using a tool called HireVue, which I think we're all loosely familiar with. The tool is just largely designed as a video interviewing platform, but we started to use it for even intake meetings. Like we would make it to where we would kind of pre-program some questions and send it for intake information, bring it back, and then automate it for the rest of the candidate experience too, kind of parsing the information that we got from within it. And even then, it was something that the recruiters, their feedback every time was like, but I love talking to the candidate. I love getting to know their story and what they do. And I think that there's definitely a place for it. It's just more elevated now. We're talking to the top of the candidates that are an option and considering from that perspective, as opposed to having 77 calls in a day and being exhausted and you can't even quite remember who you just talked to. Like really narrowing in your focus to have a bigger impact in the conversation. I think there's real value there. You just have to work with it. And so I think where we're at in terms of the journey is looking at ways that we can kind of remove the more administrative aspects and allow for that true partnership with the business on the pieces that have true outcome within the team, right? So for example, I will say, if you were to look at our trajectory for the last 5 years, when I first started, a lot of our organization within talent acquisition was order taker. How many resumes are you looking for? Okay, here. Are you an interview? Okay, I'll order taker in a lot of ways. And we've elevated a lot from that. And, to the point where we've got leaders now asking, what do you think? We've got a couple of different options. What do you think based on what I've told you? And I think the secret sauce there is education, right? So I've spent a lot of time kind of educating the teams around what is unemployment rating and why in the world should you care as a recruiter. Yes, you have this rec you need filled, but if you look up for a second to see what the unemployment market is in that particular city and come back from that to say, what's the average household income there, to understand just how steep is that hill and then work backwards from there and advising the teams and the business from that matter, right? So, a lot of that is marrying the data with the advisor work and, letting go of the lower hanging fruit, while difficult for a recruiter because they're held accountable for everything, but being willing to let go of the low hanging fruit and really focus on that high level stuff gets you to a really great place. So that's what we're looking at today, is that balance of the two. And in the end of the story with the HireVue piece is we did that as well. So we made it to where when you applied for a position, if you qualified, you were automatically invited to complete a HireVue, and it automatically went to the recruiter for review. Once it got triggered to the hiring manager, if the hiring manager put 3 or more stars on that feedback, it automatically sent an invite to the candidate to schedule an interview. So the more of those little bits of automation that we can do, it's not taking your role, it's elevating you, giving you the opportunity to focus different than you were before. And the same is true with AI, right? If we work with it, we come to a different place. And I think it's just about how we partner in that. Does that make sense?
Makes
For a lot of words for a minute. So
It makes a lot of sense. And I think understanding where we are with AI, right? Because I remember before there were ATSs,
mm-hmm. Yeah, when you had the folder.
kind of. I remember when I found out about ATSs, which is really when Taleo kind of hit the market. You heard about Resumex.
Mm-hmm.
Taleo came on the market, it started to automate things, and I think that the challenge in talent acquisition technology is the ATS because it's an applicant tracking system. Forget everything you know for 1 second. Why are we only tracking applicant when everything we do in recruiting space? How do you source? Where do you source? Where does it come from? How's that happening? What's the activity look like? What should the goals be? What should the timelines be? Without even including the applicant. It's a much bigger universe than that. In fact, our entire full circuit is built on talking about the ecosystem that you need to attract and then the methodology to get there. So I think this is an opportune time for our friends in the ATS world, and certainly for us with our product. I mean, we ignited at the request of General Motors, we ignited one piece to HireGate, which is saving about 4 hours a recruiter per seat per week. And guess how long it took our team to develop it? Less than 2 days. They handed it to Lindsay to test on Monday. They were so excited. They finished it on Saturday. I told them about it Thursday morning. They finished it Saturday night, went to Lindsay for handoff. She took it out, piloted. By that Thursday, we were live. I mean,
We
think
broke
about
it a few times in between, Christine, but we were able to slap it back together really quickly to get it out as quickly as we could to our teams. But, that is part of the fun, is trying to break it before we launch. But you are absolutely correct. And we're launching our own AI screeners this week, actually. We're seeing the rollout of that for some of our high volume roles and some of our more niche roles, and really interested to watch the journey of the AI assistant. Now at People Science, we do a double qualification, a Q1 and a Q2. So the bot will do the Q1 portion and the recruiter will complete the Q2 portion, that final qualification. But I'm really interested to see how it all plays out. And we've got recruiters really excited and some that are a little apprehensive, and hoping they'll all come together in the end, enjoying the results of the time saved for them.
Yeah, and I think really if you think about recruiting as a whole, it's interesting, right? Because my number one cringe is when someone says, "Oh, I used to be a recruiter." I'm like, okay, but it's not at all what it used to be, but thank you. But at the same time, as a whole, the skeleton is the same, right? Someone's completing a resume, someone's taking a look at it, someone's talking to you and making a decision. And I would actually argue, at the risk of going a little big here, I don't think resumes are needed anymore. Like there's a lot of those different pieces where if you turn them on their head, you can get all that information you want online. You can find out anything you want about a person online. So, do we need a resume, or is it actually we need a baseball card that has like a humble corner of lessons learned and like things we're great at? Like, what does that really look like? Do we actually need to know, your last 15 years of history, when the average recruiter spends less than 6 seconds per resume? Less than 6 seconds. And the amount of time that they're putting into creating that resume is insane. And now, granted,
and re-reporting it in most ATSs, right? So you've got it on LinkedIn, you've got your copy, you've got, if you're smart, you've got different copies for different things you're going to apply for. Then you go into one ATS, you put it in there, and then it says, okay, but you need to load it here. Upload it, make sure it's in this format, and then push it into the system.
And then now type all that information now.
Yeah.
Yes. Why it's not
Workday.
parsing it is beyond me, but you are right.
And apply for a job with another organization that has the same ATS and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I think it's time to scrap it all. Of course,
yeah.
My head is in the HR tech space because of HireGate, right? And
yeah, but that's exactly it, right?
Why we're going to try to slap more stuff on top of more stuff. With the type of development tools that are out there now, in 21, we took it off the shelf and I was a part of an AI group at a different level. So I was able to say, what about this tool and that tool? So we're able to have developers that understand that. So we're writing in AIs compared to taking, HTML base and then slapping stuff on top of it. We're trying to make it more AI efficient or more AI.
Mm.
I think it's going to be just as easy to recreate the platform.
And which, for
And
the
I think
record,
making
AI needs a boss.
AI,
Like they
yes,
need a boss too. They go
yes.
rogue. You got to keep them in line.
And they're
They
not
do.
always accurate. I mean, they're not always right. They're not always accurate. And a lot of times they can't answer every question. I was on the call the other day with a large organization, and I much preferred talking to AI, but I couldn't because it was too complex a question. I got hung up twice. It was such a complex question for them, which kind of like dumbfounded me, because what it was is I blocked on my phone their ability to talk to me because I keep getting these spam calls from the same organization, right? So now
Mhm.
I can't validate who I am. And I don't know what number I blocked. And they can't help me. So I just can't use their system. Like,
We
and
are
if
where
you
we are.
and the people that were on the phone were like, we can't help you with that. And they hung up. Like they just hung up. So, if we go back to, who are the entry level people that are in these jobs that don't want them to begin with, right? Or that resent that they have to do them? Is AI
Yeah.
a thing? I guess you're going to be reporting back to us about that soon, right, Lindsay? And
Yes.
and certainly Kathy, right? As you guys are implementing more and more, because I do think, if we go back to that, we automated processes. Now I think we're saying, okay, how can AI shorten our ability to find people, hire, take the process engineering side and do that. And now that question becomes, like you said, how much is personal as compared to. But I think the misnomer is when you make that statement, Kathy, you have come far, right? You've got HireVue in there that's doing this interviewing for you and doing some of it. A lot of companies aren't even there yet. So I think it's a natural progression is the best progression, right? So you're implementing here, then you say, okay, how can we implement from there? But I think at that point, at that juncture, is when you need a tool that says, this is what I need. And I need technology that will allow me to do this, not technology that will tell me what to do or how to do
But
it.
it also goes into the hiring manager experience, right? So, because HireVue we use within Hilton Grand Vacations, but I see it everywhere in the sense that simply telling a hiring manager, I'm going to use a video interviewing tool, for example. Super simple, right? We've been using that for 10 years now. We have hiring managers. No, I don't want candidates to have that experience. I want them to talk to you. I'm like, cool. I'm busy. This is okay. We've been doing it for decades. They know it experience. We can make it smooth. We can make it smart, but it has to happen right. So even, I talk about the secret sauce of really educating and elevating the recruiter to give them the resources they need to be amazing. But that same goes into the hiring manager too, because it's also a let go of control and, really building in that trust there. And I think that's the piece that I sit in today in terms of the business is there's so much risk in not hiring right. There is across all businesses. And, like you said, when we opened, you're like, it's something we've been fighting for a voice at the table at for a while. When we saw in 2021, make everybody disappear, and all of a sudden we're really important. We got employee commercials, come work for us, right? Like, and so I think we're not a problem till we're a problem, and we don't get that voice till those moments hit. And so it's about having the right voice at the table and the right way to educate them on the true risk in the room of doing this right and wrong and the value that comes with it. It's tough. I'm not going to lie to you. It's my toughest skill set in terms of something I'm working on as a person, because I want to be like, it's just the right answer. Being able to talk it through is something I'm working on too.
And even under normal circumstances, it's hard to say this is the kind of talent that we need. But under the current circumstance, with so many changes going, Mark Zuckerberg is now recruiting his own people. I mean, now this, so we went from like, just bring every recruiter you can. Well, hire every recruiter that's out there. Let's just do it that way too. Oh, that didn't work. So we don't know what to do. So I'm going to go back. I like to think of my Mark Zuckerberg in this way. That he would say, oh, I'll go back and do what I did when I started Facebook. I'll find the best talent that I can. I'll make this little cadre of people who code on like get it done. And as partners with Facebook for a long time, I can tell you that it's the changes that they've gone through are remarkable. Are we going to see that? A question I keep saying, are we going to see this from other founders of companies of size? Because that is really right. When you start a tech company, you bring in your buddies, y'all code together, you bring in people that you know, it's all through referral. I happen to think that that's where we're headed, by the way. I mean, if I had to make a predictive, I think we do this 180 in technology where we create technologies that allow us to work the way we want to work, not the way they all proclaim it, right? But then you're in the seat and you've got to follow if you don't follow the lineage, it won't work, right? So I think, and not that some of that doesn't make sense, but I think a better empowering tool that says, hey, I want this data, can I get it right here, is where AI can really come in and be beneficial. But when I look at the beta generation and how we're raising them and what's going on with Gen Z, and then we look at, millennials and really Gen Xers are going to rule this whole thing. I think what we're seeing is organizations that are very different than they were even 10 years ago, right? Organizations that accomplish different things that are out of the box that could never have been accomplished before. It is truly, and I wonder where the power systems and the hierarchies are going to end up. In kind of like worktopia, I'll call it, where we already do it now, right? Like it used to be, oh, it's 9 o'clock, I should be working. It's 5:30, I should be leaving, or 8:30 to 5:30, whatever the hours is. Now it's like, who's working when? Doesn't matter if you get the job done. If you're picking up your phone even when you're on vacation, which you probably shouldn't do, but picking up your phone even on vacation, saying, oh yeah, that can be done, and getting it out of the way. All that's changed. Yet our infrastructure doesn't support it yet, right? But our people. So people are saying we want to do it this way. Okay, people are saying we want to do it. We've got to educate our technologists for this.
It's evolving a lot in that sense too, in terms of having a seat at the table. I hope it maintains. We'll see. But like, for example, it used to be that if you wanted to be a chief people officer, you definitely needed to touch compensation at some point within your career. Your chances of becoming a chief people officer really go up a lot if you've hit compensation within your journey. Where now we're starting to see some in the talent acquisition space go into that chief people officer role, and even some chief talent officers, depending on the company and where they're going. So we're seeing that evolution, but similar to that of like, hot topics of the day, whether or not that sustains itself, I think is really interesting to watch in the next couple of years.
Well, we need strong players like you to do this. This is not a small lift.
Yeah, you gotta think it through for sure. But
if that's why we're calling ourselves juggernauts, because it's like it's a big lift. It's not a little.
Yeah.
And how long has HR been trying to get to the table? Right. And by the way, I think Sherman's come eons. I've never, Sherman's never been a big audience for us. But I've gotten to know some of the Sherman people, and I will say and I went to their AI project this year, and it was really good. Really well done. If you want to hear what's going on in the trenches, Sherman's the place now. They don't have as much representation as the Fortune 500s do or the Fortune 100s do. That's Burson County, right? That's country. That's where you want to head for that. But for everything else, if you really want to hear the meat, and even if you're in the Fortune 500, you want to hear what's going on, I would take a gander at what some of these Sherm conferences are accomplishing and what some of the people there are, because we've had some remarkable findings, right, Lynn? And Jess, we've seen some pretty interesting things going on like that. Such an interesting time. I'm going to go around. We'll do final words, right, Jess?
Yes.
The final words from Lindsay Roundtree first.
Collect your own data, because we never know what we're getting, and the truth in the numbers is so strong. Collect your own data.
Jess?
I think it's just being prepared for the evolution of recruiting. I don't think recruiters are going to be replaced by technology and AI, but definitely the type of person that's in the seat and the skills that they have are evolving. So start to prepare yourself with that, get familiar with AI And think outside of the box of what you're doing today. What things could make my job easier and allow me more time to focus on being an advisor to the business and building relationships with hiring managers.
Agreed. Kathy?
I think for me, it's empower the recruiters in your company, arm them with the resources to be able to elevate themselves in this time of change.
So well said. Love this panel, love this day. This has been great. I hope that the audience has gotten a lot from it. I know that I have. I always do. Thank you for the information that you've shared. Kathy, it's been great having you on. To all the juggernauts out there, keep the faith. We are making progress. This is going to be our years. I look forward to hearing from you. If you're interested in attending one of our webinars, if you have something to say, reach out to us. We'd love to hear what it is. If you'd like more surveys done, let us know. We look forward to talking to everybody soon. Thank you very much.